Tonight's video is on Rebecca of Star Giant Productions and her video addressing my abuse. A video which obviously I would have some issues with. After all, I am mentioned in it. And my video on Rebecca gets misrepresented.
Even the ones that do talk about my 2022 videos, they claim to do it as a joke.
So this might just be the worst top 10 list I've ever seen. For context, I watched this in a Discord call of about 5 people, and by the end, I don't think a single one of us wasn't pissed off. Mind you, I'm not covering this video because I'm pissed off. I'm covering this video because, first watching it, it pissed me off. And that's a very notable difference.
So you watched my video in a Discord call just to specifically shit talk and make fun of me as a joke. Okay, is this commentary a joke? I just don't find this funny.
Of course, nowhere in that clip did I say I watched the video for the sake of a joke, just that I watched it in a Discord call and got pissed off. However, if Rebecca summarized my point as that, then how was she going to repeat almost verbatim something Mr. Enter said?
There's no fun to be had in reading this, not even as a joke. And I know this for a fact, because that's how I went into this. I thought I knew what I was getting into. I was wrong. Instead of a nice laugh with some friends, we quickly became unsettled and bored that just finishing another page felt like scaling Mount Everest with only your corneas. So, let me get this straight. You bought my book as a joke. Alright, so is the review a joke too? It's not a very funny one. I don't know what the punchline is.
And by the way, literally the next thing that comes out of Rebecca's mouth is...
I don't copy off other people, for the record. I get inspired.
You were so inspired by how Enter worded that point that you decided to completely misrepresent my point to say it. This isn't even the only example, by the way. Here's a little montage I made of Rebecca saying things that seem awfully inspired by Enter.
I have a lot of different hobbies outside of animation. I play video games. I take walks. I take care of animals. I read books. I write. I play with toys. I watch trains. I go to parties. Outside of the internet, I have a life.
I'm not obsessed with cartoons. I do other things. I play games. I watch live action shows. I read books. I go on walks. Cartoons are my job, not my life.
I won't be dying alone. I may have a dying YouTube channel, but my friendships are growing. I keep getting new friends, and they become stronger than ever.
To address this message specifically, I'm not going to die alone. I'm surrounded by people who actually like and respect me, and who give me space, and who do not harass me, and who keep my own perspective in mind.
People have thought of one Enter's channel to be terminated, but honestly, I think the position that he's in right now is perfect, and it's the perfect punishment for the rest of his life.
And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be all demanding some kind of justice, to have him cast out into the wind or something. But in all likelihood, this is definitely some kind of justice. Butch is an egotist. I don't think even his defenders would argue against that. It is undeniable at this point. So, imagine how an egotist would feel if they let their corporate overlords to try and strike it out of their own, doing the most important mission of their lives. They were on a mission from God himself. They get everything that they ask for, and they still failed. They failed so massively they had to return to their corporate overlords. Some people would demand that Nick have nothing to do with Butch from this point onward, but quite honestly, I think it's more poetic if he works on Fairly Odd Parents for the rest of his life.
Currently, I'm agnostic.
At the moment, I'm agnostic.
I'm not special! I never was! I don't get why all this shit happened to me.
I'm not special! For the love of God, I'm just someone who makes videos on the internet. That is it. I don't understand why any of this has happened.
I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I understand. What did I do wrong? I told a single person to make an animatic in a week. A person that I apologized to and that accepted my apology. I called some people that I thought were my friends jerks, even though I took that video down. Apologized and they accepted my apology. I trusted people that may have been creeps, even though I have no association with them now.
Did I do anything? I called a guy an idiot. A guy who's moved up in the industry, and I probably don't occupy any space in his mind anymore. I try to make a cartoon show. Some people get it, some people don't. You know, like a lot of shows, like Adult Swim's entire repertoire.
Mind you, I'll admit that some of these are a bit of a stretch. However, the sheer volume of examples I'm able to find at the very least means this is more than a coincidence at some point. Although, Rebecca, if you don't want people like me to look at things you say and point out that they are verbatim things others have said, maybe you shouldn't accuse other people of ripping off other reviewers with some of the shakiest evidence I've ever fucking heard.
Oh, by the way, Mr. Enter's Lion King review is more or less a ripoff of Nostalgia Critic's Scooby-Doo review. If you're gonna rip off the guy, don't shit-talk him in your own ripoff! And as time travel self-talk that makes no sense.
No, not really. Off the top of my head, in Doug's video, the two other versions of the Nostalgia Critic review the entire movie with him. In John's video, only John's 8-year-old self reviews The Lion King with him. In Doug's video, both of the time equivalents show up immediately, while in John's video, it takes a while for his 18-year-old self to appear. In Doug's video, the oldest version of him is implied to be in his 50s or 60s, while in John's version, the oldest version of him is the one who's 28 and is currently doing reviews. In Doug's video, the youngest counterpart is high school to college age, while in John's video, it's 8. Doug's video was meant to be his final review as a Nostalgia Critic, while John's was not meant to be his final animated atrocity, and I could go on. Oh, also, Doug's video was directly inspired by the final episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. If you're going to accuse somebody of ripping another person off, you should probably make sure the thing they're supposedly ripping off was actually original in the first place. The other mention of me comes when we hear the testimony of the thumbnail artist for the video I covered. Now, I'll get more to these testimonies in a bit, so don't worry. However, I want to address this point specifically.
But I've always felt a bit underutilized. I'm not going to complain, but sometimes when I am being utilized, I'm given such a short amount of time to work on projects, causing thumbnails for videos to be finished after a video already goes up. For example, I was only given 5 to 10 minutes to work on the top 10 worst Christmas animations thumbnail, which the YouTuber The Infromentator made a comment on in his video, and I defended myself there, and will defend myself again here. Well, it seemed like I only had a few minutes to work on it, because I was very busy that day, which you could tell if you look at the following timestamps.
You want to know something about me, Maddie? Not only do I make all of my thumbnails in just a couple of minutes, but I don't even use an art program to make them. I literally just throw assets into Vegas and use track motion to create a picture, screenshot it, and then use it as the thumbnail. Notice how my thumbnail is not only more visually interesting and creative than what you did, but also just in general gives the audience a better idea of what the video is going to be about. As I said in my commentary, the thumbnail you made for Rebecca would be more appropriate if it was just a standalone review of Miracle on Evergreen Terrace, as opposed to a top 10 list where that's merely just one of the 10 segments. Speaking of which, let's just get these testimonies out of the way real quick. The first one comes from Cartoon Gal, and is primarily about all the good things Rebecca has done to help her. You might notice the issue with this from a rhetorical standpoint, and I'll get to that in a minute. However, the only thing I really want to highlight is this part.
So if you can apologize to Crimson, John, why can't you apologize to Rebecca as well?
Hey Rebecca, isn't that apology to Crimson the one that you called full of shit in this clip?
I felt myself getting into a very bad place in the YouTube landscape. On top of that, my only editor at the time was Crimson Mayhem. Crimson is a very good editor. I'll defend that no matter what. But as an editor, he is incredibly slow. As in, videos that could have been done in a week took 3 of them. I needed a new editor to pick up production, and Rebecca was simply the first one who asked.
Good to know that despite defending Crimson here, you would shit-talk him later on and call him a bad editor. But we'll save the Turn Red controversy for the end of this video.
First off, I feel like I should note that the potshot Rebecca shows at Crimson was not about his skills as an editor, but about his speed as an editor. Something John says in the clip Rebecca played before this interjection was a problem. You yourself should know these are completely unrelated, given you specifically state,
as we learned, speed is not a skill.
As for this bit about how if John was really sorry, he would have not waited 10 months, what if he didn't feel like what he did was wrong until 10 months later, and therefore wouldn't feel remorse about doing it until that point? This view is so simplistic, it actually hurts to think about. Also, I don't think Rebecca knows what thrown under the bus means, John didn't blame Crimson for the Turning Red controversy, he just made a potshot at Crimson on Twitter. Now, if Rebecca would like to see a case of Adam getting thrown under the bus, then maybe she should refer back to the video she made where this clip is present.
Also, I only told Adam. It was Adam that made it public, not me. And no, I didn't tell Adam to say it publicly either. I only told him to make sure that John's Twitter account wouldn't be taken down with people getting the idea that it might be an impersonator. So John, I was actually defending you the whole time. And what do I get out of this? Me getting fired. And I thought that it was okay to tell Adam since he was associated with John at one point. And Adam and I were friends at the time. We still are friends, for the record.
I should note that even if everything Rebecca said here was true, and it very well might be, I haven't done any investigation on this specifically, it still sidesteps the problem that Rebecca gave Adam, aka Crimson Mayhem, information that wasn't hers to give in the first place. Oh, and then later in the same video, I should note, Rebecca says that John's never apologized for this.
When I got a new editor, people were rejoicing because they thought I was replacing Crimson. Some of them thought that he wasn't working fast enough, ignoring the fact that he has his own videos and his own damn life. If I fed the trolls originally and gave them some kind of reaction, some kind of tell that this was getting to me, well, maybe they would have left the people I knew alone instead of using them as a—
And yet you then throw Adam under the bus for no reason. There was no reason to make that shitty claim on Twitter, and then never apologize for it.
So just to get this straight, Cartoon Gal wants John to give an apology similar to the full of shit one that he didn't give to Crimson. Speaking of which, can we talk about the absolute master backpedaling here? John didn't apologize to Crimson. Oh, he did? Well, he should have done it faster. Look, if you don't want to forgive John for this or that incident, that's fine. But don't put an artificial statute of limitations on human interaction. That's just fucking shitty. Oh, there's also this part where Rebecca negatively compares what John did to what Antimat of all people did.
Animat at least made a video for Adam.
This is followed by Rebecca playing an almost 2-minute clip of Animat where he essentially says that it's not Crimson's fault that Enter did something that, as established, John never blamed on Crimson. Maddie's testimony, the one I already played a clip from, is fairly uninteresting. The most he really says in it is that Rebecca, although not perfect, is a pretty decent boss and friend who's at the very least trying to do her best. Jackson's testimony is primarily about, again, how good of a friend Rebecca is. There's not really much to cover. And Jetto Bread's testimony is, again, just more of the same. All about how wonderful Rebecca is, and how he knows this firsthand, and how the critics just don't understand her. But let's get into why this doesn't make any sense to do just rhetorically. Obviously, your friends are going to say nice things about you in a video you made and posted on your channel. Outside of Cartoon Gal's testimony, none of the anecdotes provided even really expand on the situation. Most of them are just nodding their heads to what Rebecca says. All this really proves is that Rebecca could find some people to say nice things about her. And to quote Just a Robot, even some of the worst people in history have had friends. But don't tell Rebecca this, because apparently, according to her, merely having friends is evidence that she's a good person?
Do you think that I would have friends in the present, John, both online and in person, if I acted like how you described me? The answer is simple. You are wrong about me, John.
Of course, there are also times where she tries to argue John's claims about her having negative qualities by saying that she simply doesn't.
Luckily, though, in my opinion, the only fitting diagnosis for all of this behavior is narcissism.
I am not a narcissist, John, and I do not have narcissistic personality disorder. To have either of these, you have to only care about yourself. While for me in real life, I care about my friends and loved ones.
Yeah, right. As if you ever did anything charitable.
I'm very generous. What about that time I gave blood?
Whose blood?
Some guys.
Hi, guy with an actual copy of the DSM-5 here. Literally none of the criteria for being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder are as simple as only cares about yourself. I'm not going to attempt to answer the question of if Rebecca is or isn't a narcissist, because, to be blunt, I don't know her well enough to truly figure that out, and even then, I do not have the proper psychological training to give anything other than an armchair diagnosis. I will say, though, symptom number 3 actually did jump out at me quite a bit, given this clip.
John, you and I have never been in the same room together. Hell, we never have been in the same state together. Here's this quote from me. If you were me, then you would understand me. But if you aren't me, then you won't fully understand me.
Oh, I should also note that little rant about how John has never been in the same state as Rebecca even. Doesn't make any sense given John was talking about online conversations and those are not geography dependent.
For you to really get the idea of what kind of problem this was, here's how what she was doing would play out in reality. 2 people have a conversation at a party. They stop talking, and then Rebecca decides to continue it like 4 hours later, after the party is over. To be fair, she would sometimes insert herself in conversations at the time, ignoring what people were talking about at the time to talk about whatever was on her mind.
Also, I should note, this is far from the only part of the video where she talks about just how much of a nice and caring person she is. Here's a little montage of all the clips I found.
I'm someone that's so good and so loving that I want every human to be in heaven forever. I am not toxic or abusive. I have never been toxic or abusive, and I never will be toxic or abusive. I am not a bad boss. I am a great boss.
She made people uncomfortable.
When you get to know me better, you can assure that I'm a fun person to be around. I have flaws, and I have fixed them.
I have been truly blessed that most of the people who have worked for me have had a good deal of competence. Artists, editors, and more. Because if they were all on the level of this, we'd be living in a far worse world now, wouldn't we?
I don't care if you think that means that I can't take criticism, because I can, and I always will.
Okay, this is not the most important point in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but what the fuck is up with this spacing? I also want to address this screen in a little bit more detail, specifically the part about payment. You see, one of the reasons why we have things like business regulation and minimum wage law in the real world is because of the inherent inequity in power dynamics regarding the people with money and the people who want money. In those situations, the person with money has much more power than the person who wants money. Therefore, ideally, the people who have money are subject to a greater amount of regulation to make sure they are not taking advantage of this power. I mention this because a lot of these laws have either not really been updated for the internet age, or just aren't really enforceable in a more global space like the internet. For example, imagine I want to sue somebody for a couple $100 because they wronged me in some way, and said person lives in my state. Well, then I could just take them to a small claims court and have the issue worked out there. However, imagine if they lived in a state on the other side of the country. Well, if I wanted to sue them, then I would more than likely have to go to that state for an extended period of time, which is not only just a massive hassle, but also would cost a lot of money to do. Quite possibly more money than I'd even be suing for. I mention this because, due to those circumstances, it's fairly easy to rip people off over the internet, and they don't really have any protection. So when Rebecca tries to justify her shortchanging artists by saying that they agreed to whatever price she gave them, I honestly don't find that all that persuasive.
She shortchanged the artist who did my current avatar set. For what was supposed to be a $450 work, her avatar set, she paid $250.
But Ava agreed to the payment. If she didn't, she should have told me multiple times, but she didn't. If she didn't agree to the payment, she shouldn't have done the poses. That's on her, not me. That's the thing. Despite Ava not getting paid, fully, your words, not mine, she was fine with the lower price. Wait, by definition of law, she agreed to it.
Rebecca would probably tell you that she has no choice but to shortchange and underpay the people who work for her, because she doesn't have a ton of money to work with. Now, I'm not the smartest person in the world, obviously. I hired Rebecca after all. But...
Okay, I know this is irrelevant and a tad spiteful, but Says the person who made this joke, which is essentially on the same level.
I have no patience for liars and con men.
If that's the case, then do you have the patience for yourself?
Speaking of this screen, why are these two blocks of text in entirely different colors and I think even different fonts? It just looks strange. This isn't even the only random change in font I've noticed, by the way. Here we have white text with no outline and red text with a white outline. Other times we get white text in yet another font with black outlines. Here we don't have the timestamp for the part of the video that Rebecca is playing right now. Here we do have a timestamp. Here we don't have any kind of credit. Here not only do we not have a timestamp, but also for some reason the credit is at the bottom of the screen even though it's normally at the top. This isn't a massive issue by any stretch of the imagination. However, whenever I see this, I just can't help but imagine a book suddenly changing the font it's written in or the method of citation it uses. The lack of consistency, to say the very least, is kind of annoying. Speaking of inconsistencies regarding the text, Rebecca actually linked a full copy of her script in the description to the video. And the size the font is in keeps changing for, best as I can tell, no reason whatsoever. Anyway, back to the point about Rebecca's business skills.
One idea in this idiot's head is if you can't pay people to do your work, you might have to do your work yourself. Then Rebecca would probably say something along the lines of needing a staff to keep a consistent YouTube schedule because she has a real-world job. You know, despite apparently having the time to edit for me.
No, what I will tell you is that every single person that has edited for me has agreed to the price. If they aren't happy about the price and didn't tell me, that's on them, not me. I pay people low money, even though, they were fine with it and they accepted the payment.
And maybe that's true. That doesn't mean you didn't underpay her, though. Most people agree to the wages they're being paid, including the children who worked in the mines during the Industrial Revolution, and the people who work in sweatshops in countries like China. That doesn't mean they aren't being shortchanged or underpaid. Rebecca, are you trying out for a position at the Mises Institute? Things get worse as the video goes on, considering by the end, Rebecca is saying that YouTube and Google can pay you 1 cent an hour for your work if they want to.
Here's how they can gain my trust. By every big YouTuber and social media person repeat time and time again that the internet does not have a minimum wage law and that Google can pay you for your YouTube channel 1 cent per hour, and that is 100% acceptable. The fact that no one has ever said this once makes me extremely angry more than anything else. But yes, the internet has no minimum wage law. I guess I have to be the first to state this.
And don't get me wrong, yeah, that would be perfectly legal. It was also once legal for companies to pay their employees in credit at their company store. It was also once legal for companies to hire children and pay them 10 cents an hour. In fact, there are parts of the world where both of these practices are still legal to this day. Does that have anything to do with the underlying morality of these actions, which is what we're criticizing in the first place? Of course not. That'd be fucking stupid. Oh, by the way, if you want to play this card of it's okay because they agreed to it, I would recommend not also trying to blame John for some of your editing mistakes because you only had a certain amount of time to edit those videos, even though you presumably agreed to that time constraint.
But try to imagine having another job working at for 12 hours straight, being very busy with it and very few breaks, only to come home to have to work for 3 hours straight on a video. This was always after midnight for the record. Meanwhile, each Nicorama I had to do 3 hours back to back, as in for 21 days straight, and it made me lose my sanity.
I'm not going to defend things like not fully exploring shows, factual errors, and shoddy editing work. This cat looks like a Neopet. What cat? There is no cat in the shot. You see, this happens when you don't have enough time to look over said shoddy editing work.
Never mind the editing on some of these.
This cat looks like a Neopet.
What cat?
No, John. This is what happens when you rush the editor!
Of course, if we expected Rebecca to be internally consistent, that would also mean that it's at the very least theoretically feasible that something, anything could be her fault, and we just can't have that, now can we? This isn't even getting into how she attempts to defend her editing for John. Early on in the video, she states,
"Fuck it, you know what? We're gonna go through the videos that I edited and point out the good editing. John pointed out the bad, time for me to point out the good. It's like the Three Little Pigs story with the wolf from the wolf's perspective, and I'm the wolf."
And she does. She constantly goes on and on about all the different examples of good editing she did.
Any last words before I eat you?
Yeah, why is the background refreshing upon Norm's entrance? This is incredibly jagged. For that matter, why are Norm's head and legs outside of the background? It looks like he's standing in a black void. I wish to remind you all, by the way, this is the first clip she plays in order to prove just how good her editing for John is. And we aren't even done with said clip yet.
No, I already killed you. What are you doing here? You are dead. I saw to it, personally. What do you mean you of all films, got a sequel? How the hell did you, Norm of the North, get a sequel?
Again, Rebecca, I really do mean this. If you want to show us all how good you were as an editor, please stop showing us clips where you don't get the aspect ratio of the sprite right relative to the background you are using.
It's funny how Norm comes from out of the shadows, because the sequel 3 years later came out of nowhere.
This means that the rest of Norm in the North 2 is going to be about a polar bear in New York City.
Meanwhile, at Splash Entertainment Studios.
Sir, wasn't the first movie about a polar bear in New York City? Yeah, it was. But doesn't that mean we'll be doing the same thing over again? I know, it's brilliant. Do you really think that we have the money to make new assets or the time or inclination to be creative? You got a point. How long do you think it's gonna take to finish this one? Well, our lunch break is over, so I guess we're done.
See, it's like Adam and I are our own writers. We're making jokes, all for a plan to send 2 monkeys into the desert.
You tell anyone about this, you're canceled. Charlie Rose canceled.
Who the fuck wrote this?
It's funny because of John's acting, and the black screen is perfect because what else are you supposed to put there?
The background and his avatar, given he has stills specifically to use in cases where the emotions he's expressing are confusion or distaste for what he's watching? Just a thought! Mind you, even if this was the case, and she did actually make tons of good editing decisions as well as several bad ones, that wouldn't inherently invalidate John's point. John didn't say that she was absolutely inept in every single way at editing, just that she was his worst editor and made more mistakes than he personally felt was worth dealing with. She's also very fond of, in response to John pointing out editing errors, acknowledging that other people have made those errors, so therefore it's fine, I guess. I won't be playing a large chunk of these clips, however, I am going to highlight one specific example.
Many times the logo from the bootleg site she took were not hidden or removed.
So Rebecca goes on to accuse John of plagiarizing Just Stop, essentially, because if there's anybody who has the right to criticize somebody else for copying words whole cloth, it's certainly Rebecca. Gives us more or less a Sony Vegas tutorial on how to zoom things in, and has a random aside about originality, all combined lasting about 2 minutes, before saying the thing I actually wanted to address. God, this video is poorly structured. Yeah, this is a bit of an aside, although, to be fair, I guess that's kind of perfect given the topic I'm about to mention, but Star Giant fills this video with irrelevant tangents.
Side note, John still uses watermarks even after firing me, so, of course, this makes him a hypocrite.
Of course, this point fails because John specifically said the issue at hand was watermarks for piracy websites, not watermarks more generally. Global HD is not a piracy website. And neither is Amazon Prime, by the way. And by the way, neither of those watermarks are nearly as intrusive as the double watermark Rebecca got in her footage for My Gym Partner's a Monkey, which was used in the video of John's that she edited. Oh, there's also this part.
And I'm also, might as well as mention, I never asked for any of her self-inserts. Anything she inserted of herself, of her voice, and so on was done completely without permission. The Certifiable Super Sitter title card was commissioned of her own accord because she really wanted her face to be seen in one of my videos. And the less that I say about the custom avatars that she made that I did not ask for, the better.
And following this tasteless as fuck bit...
And yes, the father's name is indeed Robert.
Robert, huh? Isn't that also...
If you make that comment, I swear that I will put a voodoo curse on you and your dog. I'm warning you, do not do it.
I guess John did put a curse on me, because I'm being constantly stalked by randos on the internet in 2023, and my dog died last year. Ironically enough, he died during the production of me making this video originally. Did you know that people sent comments to me saying that they're glad that my dog died? I regret deleting them right away to prove to you the shit that I received.
And this part where she talks about asking for permission before making changes to a video she's editing for somebody else and getting paid to edit, by the way, with asking permission to blink?
Permission? What? Do I have to ask for everything from you? May I blink? May I breathe?
She attempts to whataboutism her way out of this argument by essentially saying that Crimson also did something kind of like that at one point.
Also, Crimson did a self-insert once.
I don't do sex, but I do second base.
Mommy, what does sex mean?
Of course, this falls apart for several reasons, among them the fact that Crimson's edit was far less intrusive, far shorter, and far more relevant to the topic at hand than what Rebecca did. Not only that, but John didn't even say these self-inserts were a bad thing, just that he didn't ask for them. Lastly, both of the arguments I just showed you don't make any sense because John didn't say these were faults unique to Rebecca's editing. Just that Rebecca did them. He's not saying any of these in isolation would have individually made Rebecca a bad editor, but instead that it was a case of so many different errors seeping through that he declared her such. And even then, John says in the video it wasn't her failures as an editor that caused her to be fired from the team, instead citing her inability to work with her fellow members of John's staff as the reason she was axed. But now let's talk about the fifth testimony, because fuck, it pissed me off. Okay, so in Mr.Enter's Further Thoughts on Homer Badman, he talked about false rape accusations, as well as an idea that was then prevalent that the average man would rather be raped than falsely accused of rape. John specifically said that he would personally rather be raped than falsely accused of rape, on the condition a child was not conceived and his rapist chose to carry it to term. Regardless of what you think of that sentiment, and don't get me wrong, there are reasonable arguments you can make against it. Remember, the Further Thoughts on Homer Badman came out in 2016 at the height of things like the Tobuscus accusations, when no one really knew where those would go. Not only that, but the notion of false rape accusations was not as widespread as it is today, and as such, people were less likely to handle the accusations as, well, accusations. Either way, it's a delicate subject, and John was very much opening himself up and becoming vulnerable with his audience when he expressed this opinion. Star Giant, in an attempt to refute this entirely subjective feeling, essentially trauma dumped on her audience and then had one of her friends come in and do the same.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you forever. Fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourselves, you fucks.
That entire section of the video is over 13 minutes in length. I will not be playing a single fucking frame of it. No, not even her utter dismissal of the harm false rape accusations can do, which can really piss you off if you know who, for example, the Central Park Five are. I am not playing this because I have something called basic fucking decency, which apparently Rebecca lacks if she decides the only way to argue against a point is what essentially amounts to out-traumaing her opponent. I really feel like I need to drive this home. Again, regardless of if you agree with what John said all those years ago, he was opening himself up and becoming vulnerable to his audience. Rebecca not only decided to attempt to refute these entirely subjective stances, but did so with so little tact that it essentially amounted to her and a friend trauma dumping. From the bottom of my heart, go fuck yourself. Now, when Rebecca isn't using the trauma of other people to win arguments on the internet, she's using her own as an excuse for acting like a shitty person. Enter her attacking John's editor Coda for having a diaper fetish.
I guess I should be lucky that I got in trouble in October and not later, because if it happened to me in 2022, I probably would have rage rant about other things, like how the editor that replaced me has a creepy diaper fetish.
I want to address the last sentence of text on screen here real quick. What exactly does Rebecca think is contradictory about drawing fetish art and posting it publicly, best as I can tell, only at places that specifically pander to those desires, and being professional in a business setting? You do know most people who draw fetish art have real-world jobs, right? I don't get the point here.
For the record, I know I talked about Coda before, and I actually do have PTSD on diapers for personal reasons, so it's not an attack on Coda. But I'm just saying that in the public eye, it's probably best not to display this. I am not trying to kink shame. Whatever Coda does in his free time is not my business. I just don't like how this is the one that John says is better than me.
The reason, as explained in another part of the video that I will not play, involves the death of her own dog. I will also not be playing this segment. Although I will say using your own dog's death as reason to insult somebody's fetish is, what are the words that would apply there? Manipulative, in bad taste, shitty, just tons of different terms work. Or how about a part where Rebecca justifies telling somebody they were too suicidal and only considering it for brownie points because she was under a lot of stress at the time, as if that inherently excuses it. Before going on to imagine a situation where she was suicidal and nobody cared, not say this actually happened, by the way, although even if that were the case, that wouldn't justify anything, but just say that she gets this gut feeling that this would be the case. She's not even using the bad actions of others to justify her own, she's using utterly hypothetical bad actions to justify her own. I will not be playing this section of the video either because I inherently refuse to dignify such a justification. And I just want to say, by the way, I have to congratulate Rebecca in a way, because this is the first time I have ever not played a clip in a video I'm covering, not because I don't have anything to say on it, but because the argument involved is so inherently repugnant to me that I genuinely would not feel comfortable putting it on a video and uploading it to my channel. I just wish to be as blunt as possible. I do not view using your trauma as a bludgeon as a legitimate way to win arguments. Again, especially in the utterly tactless method Rebecca and her friend used against John, getting incredibly vulnerable and opening himself up to his viewers. In the same regard, although I am very sympathetic towards people who have undergone trauma, I do not view that as an excuse for bad behavior. Nor do I think "I was in a bad headspace" trademark is the excuse for acting shitty that Rebecca and so many other bad people who I've had to deal with keep pretending it is. Look, I could use my own personal experience to explain my distaste for all three of these arguments. However, not only would doing so be incredibly hypocritical, but it would also be utterly pointless. As the fact is, these are nothing more than deflections. They aren't attempts to provide context to the situation, they're attempts to divert blame away from Rebecca. They are attempts to guilt the other parties into conceding. And to be blunt, I do not respect that, nor do I tolerate it. Honestly, I don't even know what else to say at this, given it honestly feels like the only things left to cover are just her missing the points being made in ways that, to be blunt, are incredibly uninteresting compared to things I've already discussed. So, final thoughts? This is the worst video I've ever covered. The constant deflection put together with missing the point, put together with the tangents, put together with the needless amounts of whataboutism, put together with just the utter lack of tact and basic taste that Rebecca showed in this video, honestly makes this one of the most unwatchable pieces of shit I have ever encountered on YouTube. And the fact that it goes on for 3 hours honestly is inexcusable given just how little substance there actually is to it. This video is all around a mess. And it is currently my pick for not only the worst commentary of 2023, if you wish to consider it a commentary, I personally do, but also one of the worst commentaries I have ever seen in my entire life. Good night and good luck.